we need to go to the stars. We need to go to beyond Mars and to the other planets. And he's like, and little do people know, but there's a little potato-shaped moon around Mars that...
What's up, guys? If you're not...
Dude, one of the things that always makes me question even the ancient advanced civilization hypothesis, which, you know, if this has any merit to it, and I'll tell you kind of what my thought of it is,
Sure.
if it has any merit to it, then it could lean more towards the aliens side of things, right? But if humanity once got to a point thousands of years ago where it was that advanced, one thing I can say about our generation of people is that the more advanced we've got, the more shit we've put in space. Why are there no ancient advanced satellites? You know what I'm saying? Why have we never found any of that shit? Or have they found that shit and we just don't hear about it? You know?
Possible. I'm not looking up there, you know? I don't have that, but that's a good question. And that's like, correct me if I'm wrong because I haven't seen all of it. Did Ancient Aliens try to talk about some of that? Like there's some shit in space? Or did I just make that up?
I mean, Ancient Aliens has probably hit on every aspect of the UFO phenomenon possible. I know one thing that is interesting, and I actually have a video about this, but it's the whole moon of Mars. You know, and the angle of that video was why...
I haven't seen that video. Let's talk about that.
Okay, so yeah, this is interesting. So essentially, one of the things that Buzz Aldrin, the guy who you guys said you interviewed, the guy who... he punched in the face.
Alessi was on his podcast interview. Who was that? What was that guy's name, Alessi?
Bart Sibrel.
So he punched Buzz Aldrin punched him in the face for questioning the moon landing?
Because what happened was he literally just like point blank journalism ran in front of him and had a Bible, and he's like, swear on the Bible that you made it to the moon. He just like out of like, and there's like press and they're in a hotel and everything. Yeah. And Buzz Aldrin's like, leave me alone or whatever, and then he just like clocked him
in the face.
Yeah. Honestly, good for Buzz.
Yeah.
Anyway, continue.
Yeah. So Buzz was on, it was like C-SPAN or some like news program, you know, probably around that time in the 80s or 90s. And he was like, we need to go to the stars. We need to go to beyond Mars and to the other planets. And he's like, and little do people know, but there's a little potato-shaped moon around Mars that circles Mars once every 7 hours. And on this little potato-shaped object, there's a giant monolith there. And when people see that, they're going to go, who put that there? Who put that there? This is my impression of Buzz Aldrin.
I can tell. It's a pretty good one.
And literally, if you look it up, you can Google monolith on Phobos. It's the name of the moon.
Phobos or
Phobos. Look up this monolith. It is ginormous. So the picture that you're seeing, it's clearly got like right angles and it's a very tall shadow that has like sharp edges. That one down, second one down right there. Yeah, click on that. So that's like it at 3 different zooms. And the fact that you're seeing that means that it's probably several miles tall. You know what I'm saying? From space. So that's the monolith he's referring to. What's that face-looking
thing?
That's the face on Mars.
Where?
One picture over.
The one that looks like up, left.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I missed that one.
That's the one that NASA has claimed they've debunked many times. So have you never seen that photo?
I don't think so. No.
So there's a NASA photo of...
So funny. People expect when they walk in here, like, I've seen all this shit.
Yeah.
Bro, I'm just an internet user like you. Tell me about it.
I mean, there was like a whole movie in the 90s based off of going to visit that face. So I think it was in the 80s or the 90s, NASA satellites took a photo of Mars's surface, and they found this peculiar face on... and that's made out of like a huge mountain. And then they went back and took another photo of it, and it looked completely different. And many people think that NASA changed the appearance of it. I think that might be a more high resolution image of it. But a lot of people have thought, oh, there's aliens on Mars because
Yeah.
that's a face that they erected or whatever.
But also looks like, you know how like when you look in the clouds
Yeah.
and like you see a dog.
That's what NASA says. So
I might be on NASA's side for that one.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. Call me a shill.
well, I wasn't bringing up the face. That was just a face that you saw on the Google image search because I think the face is probably fake. But that monolith on Phobos, which is the moon, if you actually click on the image right below the face, that's the potato-shaped moon of Mars.
How big is this thing allegedly?
Not very big. So here's the crazy part.
What's not very big? Like the size of New York City, the size of New York State. That's
Probably a
tough
large
question.
comet.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Guy thinks I know how big comets are.
it's a cop-out answer for me as well. Yeah. It took big enough to take out the dinosaurs. Let's just put it that
All
way.
right, that's good enough.
So essentially, if you look at, and this again is one of those things that ties into the existence of a potential secret space force, because that's where the Nazis apparently have a base with the reptilians, and the secret space program is on Mars.
We're going full David Icke.
We're
now,
going,
huh?
yeah. Again, if you believe that line of alternate history,
no.
right?
No, I definitely don't. He
But-
won't be on this podcast.
I mean, this might trip you out. So when I heard about that monolith is when I started looking into it, and one of the things I noticed was that Russia is like 0 for 9 on trying to land any rovers on Mars, and the U.S. is like 13 for 14. Like we're like
Fuck off,
Mahomes in that
Putin.
bitch, right?
Yeah.
But the crazy thing is, Russia's been trying to go there, I think, even before us. And there's always a weird reason why it fails at the last second. So a couple of the original rovers that landed on Mars were just completely not functional when they landed, right? Another one that they landed on there, I forget the name of it, but it landed and it sent back one image before dying a minute later. And the image looked like white noise from an old TV. You know, it looked just, there's nothing discernible in that image, right? And then they decided after that, hey, if we can't get on Mars, let's go for Phobos, the moon. And they named, and so this mission, basically, they created 2 different ones, Phobos 1 and Phobos 2. And they sent them both like within months of each other. That way one could be a fail-safe, right? Phobos 1 essentially crash lands into the surface and doesn't really do anything. It just crashes, right? The second one, Phobos 2, is their last chance to try to get there, right? And while it's passing Phobos and going towards Mars, something knocks it out of orbit. Something just hits it, right? Some object. And it's spinning. But while it's spinning, it's flashing pictures, like taking pictures this whole time. So you have a spinning camera that's just taking pictures nonstop, essentially, right?
Dick Cheney's waving at the camera.
2 images that came out of this, very interesting. One image has Phobos in the background, and right next to Phobos, and in between Phobos and this thing, is this long cigar white shaped object. It's just, and the measurement that they got from it was like it had to have been like something like a mile long.
Do we have this picture?
You could probably look up the picture. Yeah. Phobos to UFO, something like that. So then there's another picture that it took, and this one was taken as it was crash landing into Mars surface because it didn't have a good entry point or whatever. So that picture right here where it looks like a pointer and a white dot
Down,
right
down,
below your
right,
mouse.
Down, right.
You
No,
go left.
no.
One left one right there. That's the image. So that's Phobos in the back, and that is a mile long. And keep in mind that's also really fucking wide if that's a mile. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? So that is interesting. Another thing. So go down a little bit. Over
This one or this side?
right there, right where your cursor was, where the mouse was, right there. Another picture it took on Mars' surface, it got multiple images of this thing, is a saucer-shaped shadow of presumably what this object was. And it was also casting a large shadow of itself onto the surface of Mars that Phobos was photographing after it got knocked out of orbit by this thing, right? So, yeah, that's interesting. And so essentially, Russia, like, they put out these public images that they took, like, look, this is the reason why we can't land on Mars. Like,
But the U.S. can.
yeah. And so there's like a famous photo of like one of the higher ups in their space program, which the Russian space program has been a joke anyways.
Right.
But one of the higher ups was like, she's famous for holding that photo that that I showed you of that long white object in front of like a conference room full of reporters. There's an image of that somewhere.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that. So you did a full video on that on your channel.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, everyone, make sure you go check that out. Wow. Yeah, like once you start thinking about like colonizing other planets, we talk about it so nonchalantly in a way. You know, Elon's like, yeah, I want to colonize Mars. But like Elon is an American now, right? Like he lives in America. If he went to do it, that's a national security issue if it's just him for other countries, right? It's a national security issue for us. We got to make sure, you know, he's working with the government, I guess, or something like that. But it gets really weird because, you know, these are things that if we lived in a utopian world, everyone should be on board with, right? Like, okay, we're all, as a world, going to go explore other planets. I would argue that outside of a handful of countries in the Soviet Union, when we landed on the moon, you know, there was probably some jealousy that, like, the U.S. did it. But, you know, people are like, okay, this is good for us. But if we're looking at actually being able to physically maneuver ourselves to get human beings onto another planet with the idea that we are going to populate there and create a community, it gets real weird when you put those borders up in space too. Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.